Good Game. I'm Bajo.
And I'm Hex.
Over the last week, we've been exploring the galaxy, fighting alongside our friends, and stabbing some giant purple glowing balls. Yes, we are ready to share our Destiny thoughts with you.
You could have said that a little bit more eloquently, Bajo.
Golden Gun time!
Also this week, it's point-and-click crime noir with a twist in The Journey Down.
Here goes. What was that sound? Oops!
Plus, Goose checks out the gem collecting and teleporting in Velocity 2X.
But before all that, can you name the game for this week?
Here's what's making news this week. Microsoft has acquired Minecraft developer Mojang for $2.5 billion US. Both companies have stressed that development and support on Minecraft will continue across all platforms. To coincide with the purchase, it was announced that Minecraft creator Marcus Notch Persson would be leaving the company, along with fellow Mojang founders Carl Manner and Jacob Porser. Notch announced on his personal blog that as soon as the deal is finalized, he'll be leaving to pursue smaller projects. He added, "If I ever accidentally make something that seems to gain traction, I'll probably abandon it immediately." In more studio shifts, Steve Jaros, creative director on Saints Row, has left Volition after 10 years with the company. Jaros is moving to Valve Software for an as-yet unknown role. And veteran Elder Scrolls designer Ken Rolston has partnered with Hinterland Games for their upcoming crowdfunded title The Long Dark. And in sadder news, Douglas E. Smith, developer of the 1983 hit Lode Runner, has passed away at age 53. Smith created Lode Runner while studying architecture at the University of Washington. Little did he know that he was working on what would become a seminal platformer of the 1980s. And that's all the news for this week.
I'm looking for a very special old book.
A book? Listen, lady, this is a gas station. We don't sell no books.
Actually, for you, lady, we just started selling them.
Originally released in all of its low-res, pixelated glory back in 2010, the point-and-click puzzler The Journey Down has had somewhat of a makeover.
I quite like the look of the original Hex. It harkens back to those old LucasArts days and suited the game well.
Plus it was, and still is, free.
However, if you're keen to experience the game with a look and feel that's a little more current, the first 2 chapters of a new HD version have been recently released online for a pretty reasonable price, with a few additional locations and puzzles thrown in as well.
Well, the first thing I noticed about this game was the incredibly unique character art. Most of the characters in The Journey Down have been modelled from African masks, which gives an unusual quality to it, especially since no one has any eyeballs.
Amazing!
The whole world is an interesting mishmash of ideas though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of film noir goes Caribbean. The game begins with brothers Bwana and Kito discovering that the power has been cut to the gas station they own due to unpaid bills.
Man, we're screwed now.
Oh, man.
As luck would have it, a young woman by the name of Lena offers to pay them in return for helping her get to the mysterious town of Port Artu, where she's hoping to track down a lost artifact.
There's some fun humour to the character writing and dialogue, with the game's protagonist Bwana being instantly likeable as he chatters away.
It's a painting of a father, Captain Kaunandodo. He adopted me and Kito off the streets when we were scumbag kids.
Sometimes he takes too long to get to the point though, Hex.
Yeah, there are some seriously long conversations in this game in general. They're skippable, but the information in those exchanges is generally pretty important, so I wouldn't advise it.
Ever heard of someone named Kaunandodo?
Kaunandodo? Haven't heard that name in a long, long time. A pilot, isn't he?
Yeah, that's him!
Yes, there were some massively long conversations that I just skipped over, only to have to go back and listen to them all again later.
I was concerned about the puzzles to begin with.
This might be dumb enough to work.
One of the early ones required me to replace the rungs of a ladder with breadsticks.
Man, they fit perfectly.
I mean, I dismissed that idea initially because I was like, as if breadsticks would hold human weight, but that was the solution, it turns out.
Let's hope they don't snap when we climb them. After you, lady.
Well, they were stale breadsticks.
Right, well, I guess the laws of physics just led me astray. Once I got into that quirky headspace, though, I found some wonderful challenge in solving these puzzles.
This ought to spice things up.
Yeah, this isn't the place for regular logic. It's video game logic only here. And it had just the right amount of challenge that I want from a point-and-click adventure like this.
Yeah, you'll definitely need a lot of patience and lateral thinking. And some of it is about going through all of the items in your inventory and trying to combine them or see how they might be used.
I'm not so sure Makina would approve of my cooking, but okay.
One gripe I have is having to keep going back and talking to people to get more information from them in order to progress to the next stage of the puzzle.
Well, that settles it. We'll raise anchor tonight.
Once I've spoken to someone, I figure the job is done, and then I spend the rest of the time just looking for objects and items.
I did enjoy episode 2 way more than episode 1 though. The locations and characters were so much more interesting and there was more to do, though I did find myself going back and forth a lot as well, which got a bit tedious. Still, humour was woven into even the puzzle scenarios, which I loved.
Yeah, there were unique problems, weren't they? How do I get past this vicious pelican, for example?
No way I'm going closer, man.
Or this hungry man who keeps eating all my canapes.
Oh man, you finished all my canapes.
This new version brings with it a great voice cast, which was something that was lacking from the original game.
Oh, you don't want to mess with a man. He's a mean dude with a license to grind your bones to dust if he wants to.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing I want to mention is the extra content unlocked at the end of episode 1. Developer diaries, photos, concept art.
There were even screenshots of random code, weren't there?
Yeah, I loved that. It was wonderful to actually get an insight into the whole process, especially since this was essentially from a one-man team in terms of game design. Overall, I think this was a really lovely experience. The HD makeover has definitely refreshed this story. There's an interesting uniqueness to the world it's set in, and the puzzles offered a decent level of challenge.
Man, this lamp is smashed beyond repair. I gotta find a replacement.
I don't think I could actually recommend the re-release though, Hex.
Really?
Yeah, well, not over the original. The HD release felt a bit like it was from the mid-90s rather than something truly current.
I completely disagree. I think this version had way more life and spark to it. I'm giving it 7.
Yeah, well, this is still a good game. I just prefer the original, so I'm giving it 6.
Oh, that was bomba.
So my first gaming love was the Dune RPG on Amiga. I didn't know about that franchise or that brand before. You know, the Frank Herbert novel and the sci-fi movie. This game, it's basically like a mix of kind of story RPG, but also like expansion and trading. So you would have to like trade for spice. You'd have to go on raiding missions against Baron Harkonnen and his family, and you would kind of build your own empire. The cinematics were like single pixel frame images, but I was just like so wrapped up in the story and riding the sandworms, which is awesome. I just got it from a friend. He was just like, "Hey, you should check this out," and he gave me the floppy, and I went home and played it. So this whole love for this universe just spawned with that one game.
Velocity 2X is a fast-paced scrolling shooter from Future Lab, and it's a follow-up to their 2012 original. In it, you play as Lieutenant Kai, who, after dodging death shutting down a black hole, finds herself abducted by an alien race who plan to use her ship's warp tech for their own dastardly intergalactic doings. Luckily for Kai, a fellow alien prisoner breaks her out. In return, Kai agrees to help save the alien slave race by recovering life pods while she searches for a way home. While the story only serves as a thin excuse to string together the game's stages, I was actually impressed with the playful writing. It never takes itself too seriously and adds some much needed personality and colour to what could be a pretty standard shooter. Speaking of colour, the game's neon electric palette also provides a great art style that, while simple, creates a sharp, clean aesthetic that suits the frantic action and intense pace of the game. Unfortunately, cutscenes between levels are restricted to static storyboard stills that don't really maintain the inertia of the gameplay, and the lack of any voice talent also detracts from the characters. A real missed opportunity, especially for Kai herself, who looks like she's modelled off some sort of cyborg hipster version of Samus. As you venture upwards in your ship through the game's vertical stages, you'll use your warp drive to teleport around the screen, avoiding obstacles and jumping to new areas. This is done by combining a button press with the thumbstick to navigate the cursor to your desired location. At first, it feels pretty clumsy and awkward, as does the multi-directional bombs, forward-facing cannons, and extra thrusters. But there's something really wonderful about the game's controls. After a few stages, everything will just start to make sense, and there's a real moment of clarity as everything just effortlessly blends together. Suddenly, you're teleporting with a quick flick of the thumbstick, flinging out bombs in every direction, all while blasting through enemies at breakneck speed in a zen-like trance, and it just feels fantastic. The game breaks up these in-ship missions with the addition of side-scrolling platform areas, which put you in control of Kai herself as she navigates interiors. While a direct contrast to the space combat, these sections were actually the highlight of the game for me, feeling less like a tacked-on feature and more like a second game entirely. These areas manage to mimic your ship's controls but on a horizontal plane, and all without losing any of that sense of speed and fluidity. Kai can teleport short distances, sprint and slide, as well as fire her arm cannon in a glorious 360 degrees. And much like the space stages, you're encouraged to link all these moves together and race through each area collecting gems and leaping obstacles without ever pausing for a breath. And while I really enjoyed flipping between these two game styles on the fly, I was a bit disappointed with the overall lack of urgency in the game. Sure, there's a generous timer for each stage, and you'll need to earn XP by completing levels in faster times, but there was never really a threat of failing a stage or being forced to make death-defying stunts. This is especially relevant during the puzzle stages that have you searching for and destroying numbered switches to deactivate force fields. There is some interesting backtracking to be had with deployable spawn beacons that can be navigated on a map screen, and this is where some of the level design really shines, with multiple branching paths a la Metroid. But overall, these maze-like levels end up breaking the flow of the game as they slow it right down to a crawl, and in a game called Velocity, this isn't a good thing. Fortunately, these stages only make up a small portion of the game, and the remaining levels are all cleverly designed to utilize the game's best features like mid-jump warps, sideways strafing runs, and even a projectile teleporter that can be thrown to reach distant platforms. The game also throws a number of boss battles at you, and they're great little skill tests. However, just like the regular enemy types you'll face, there's never really enough of them, and they lack any meaningful variety. It's not a huge game with a total of 50 short levels, however, replaying stages is often inevitable if you want to gain enough XP to progress through to the end. Suddenly facing a locked out level when I thought I was progressing steadily really felt like hitting a brick wall. And I was forced to go back and either speedrun levels or collect more gems and life pods. It's not an unenjoyable experience, but I would have preferred doing so after completing the main game instead of breaking up the pace of the story. Overall, while Velocity 2X feels a little fiddly at first, this sci-fi shooter is well worth the play as it's a real thrill to master, so I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Thanks, Goose. Now it's time for us to take to the stars and fulfill our destiny.
Destiny has finally arrived, and we've spent the last couple of weeks eagerly exploring it. It's the epic sci-fi role-playing first-person shooter that promises to seamlessly blend both multi and single player into some kind of not quite MMO cooperative shootathon.
It's also Bungie's first game since 2010 and their first non-Halo game since 2001. Not to mention they've been promising us the stars with this game from day one. So safe to say our expectations were very high.
Let's go through some of the basics. So, as with any RPG, first things first, you create your character and choose their class.
Hex, I remember during the alpha complaining that I was unable to make a creepy looking character, but I found a way. Behold, the space clown. A hero is born.
There are many tales told throughout the city to frighten children. Lately, those tales have stopped. The children are frightened anyway.
Noticing a bit of a clown theme with you lately. Why is that? That's so creepy.
It just makes me happy.
Yes, well, character creation is still quite limited in my opinion, but I did appreciate the variety of hairstyles. After you've created your character, they pretty much drop all of the story on you.
The Traveler and its arrival changed us forever.
Mostly because after the intro, there's barely any story told. Throughout the game, there's only a handful of pretty dull cutscenes.
You're interesting. Not entirely interesting.
There's barely any memorable events, and no characters that you ever get to know well or even care about.
Who are you?
Why have you been watching us?
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
And most of the information is delivered to you via in-game chatter from your ghost, aka Game of Thrones Peter Dinklage.
Up the hill, the building with the radar. That's the Skywatch.
I'm a big fan of Peter Dinklage, and at first I thought he would be a great choice for this, but now I'm not so sure, Hex. He just sounds so bored all the time.
Up ahead, a ridiculously large Vex emission. Sounds like what we're looking for.
Yeah, I have a theory that maybe he was directed that way to sound robotic, but you know, characters like Wheatley, which are really similar sort of AI companions, they prove that robots can have heaps of personality.
Yeah, this is true. I don't know, I just felt like he was taking me out of the game a little bit because he's also so recognizable from Game of Thrones. Felt like Tyrion was there just talking to me all the time.
Signal dropped. I got some broken coordinates. Venus, Northern Hemisphere. Ishtar region.
Ultimately, I didn't mind his performance. It just annoys me when so much of the story is delivered through that in-game dialogue.
I do think the setup and backstory is interesting, though. This feels like a universe full of stories waiting to be told. They're just not told with this game, at least not yet.
Well, speaking of the backstory, essentially, modern-day humans discovered this strange space sphere known as the Traveler on Mars. What it is exactly is a mystery. Is it a big alien ship, some sort of floating computer, perhaps even a god? Whatever it is though, it helped humanity enter a long golden age where we broke our earthly bonds and colonized new planets.
But it clearly neglected to mention to anyone that it had an ancient enemy known as the Darkness that would follow in its wake and nearly wipe humanity out of existence.
This darkness found us.
So this ball can advance our society immeasurably, but fails to mention to anyone about the looming apocalypse?
Thanks, stupid jerk ball.
Yeah, what a jerk ball. Story aside, let's get to what this game does very well. The gameplay, the shooting and looting, is fan-bloody-tastic.
Yeah, it's pretty much perfect. Combat is super satisfying. The way enemy shots all give you that little chance to sidestep them.
Hey, thank you very much.
While they all pop and crumble when you nail their weak spots. And you double jump around the place, launching off super attacks, slinging grenades, and getting up close and personal with solid melee hits. It was a satisfying, deadly dance that I just never tired of.
Hex, I could watch numbers fly off enemies' heads all day. I just love it.
I'll take out this tiny drone while you take on the big guy. How does that sound?
I got him.
Oh, good.
There's some great variety to the enemies too, with 4 different alien species, each with a unique hierarchy of soldiers and tactics that go along with it. Like the Vex, a crowd of Terminators that don't stop advancing until you put them down. And the Cabal are just a big bunch of walking tanks that might look slow, but will jetpack all up in your grill. Each encounter feels meticulously designed too, always keeping you on your toes and throwing curveballs at you just when you think you're safe.
Ooh, nice orb.
Thanks.
Oh, ow. Oh dear.
I don't necessarily think they had the same kind of charm and character that Halo's Covenant had, though. I mean, there was none of that kind of endearing chatter that I noticed. But they work together and are just as much fun to fight.
I never think these bullets are going to hit me, and they've got that slight bit of homing on them. Yeah. Damn. We can do this, Hex. We can do this. Oh dear, I'm just going to hide back here for a little bit.
Yes. And the progression rewards and loot are perfectly paced out. You're always leveling up something or striving towards reaching the requirements to use that next gun or equip that new armor.
The game's quite reserved at handing out loot, isn't it? But I quite like that, and I was surprised that I like that. Each mission maybe gets you 1 or 2 new pieces of gear to work with, but that means everything feels much more significant when you get it.
Oh, loot! I can't get to it!
I think I got it.
I think it's shared loot anyway.
They've just nailed that drip feed of gear, haven't they? I haven't got any legendary stuff yet, but I want it.
The guns feel really good too, although I was a little bit disappointed that they're all based off existing human weapons. I mean, everything's either a pistol, a shotgun, a rifle, or a rocket launcher.
Yes, the most exotic weapon is the fusion rifle, which is kind of like a long-range shotty that you have to charge up. That's cool and all, but I want what the aliens are using. Give me some plasma weapons, Bungie.
Well, no doubt some of those late-game legendary and exotic weapons will spice things up a bit.
Let's talk about how you get around this universe. At any point, you can bring up your Ghost and launch into orbit, and from here you can choose which mission to launch into next.
And as you progress through the story, you'll unlock missions on Earth, the Moon, Venus, and finally Mars. There's also a free roam patrol option where you can run around and do little missions or just explore.
The echo chat is really cool in here.
Isn't it?
It's like we're pooping in cubicles next to each other.
Free roam is also where random public events happen, which offer up some fun little missions like taking on a big boss or something a bit different.
All right, ready if you are.
Each planet has a large area to explore, but even so, it's just 4 levels to play around in. Just 4, come on. There is a 5th area on the map, but that literally just had a cutscene in it, which was a bit of a cruel tease. For a sci-fi game that sounded so epic and expansive, for there to only be 4 levels feels a bit small.
Yeah, I was really disappointed. That said, at least all of those areas are super beautiful. I mean, the art and the lighting and the time of day effects, so many slow pans, Bajo. It's a feast for the eyes.
It's also a feast for the ears. The sound effects pack such a punch, and I never got tired of hearing those sparrows boost around the place. Speeder bikes make me happy. Give me speeder bikes, and I will buy your game.
What you doing there?
Well, watch it. Oh,
Just
no!
try, oh. Hey, let's see if I can ride it.
I'm just trying to make you go off the edge.
Hey.
And I can't speak highly enough of the music either.
Yeah, it's pretty much faultless from a technical perspective, isn't it? And for an always online MMO, it launched pretty much without incident, and I don't think I encountered any bugs. It's super slick.
Yeah, and that's no small achievement. There's a lot of polish.
Okay, back to my gripes. Didn't you feel like all the missions felt really similar? I mean, they all involve going somewhere, deploying a ghost, and fighting off a few waves of enemies, and maybe a boss-type character. There was one cool mission where you got a sweet sword, but that was about as different and diverse as the gameplay got. The combat is satisfying enough to make them all fun, but it's just a bit uninspired.
Yeah, I was expecting more variety. Where are the big set-piece battles? There's not even that many vehicle sections. You often deploy your Sparrow to get around, but it's rare that you find any vehicles with guns on them to use.
Oh, is this your bike? Is this your bike?
Oh, come on, I took out that bad guy for you. Hi!
Hi, we brought our bikes. We brought our bikes. Hi. Excuse me. Oops.
It was not graceful, but it was efficient.
I think variety is something that Destiny is just lacking in general.
Yeah, me too, and I don't think it's just the hype getting to us.
Yeah, I mean, there's very little outside of just shooting and looting. I mean, where's the option to go inside my ship and deck it out with trophies and loot? Or, you know, the little mini games or racing modes, and why can't I ever fly my ship? Ah!
Yes, I demand space combat. Still, at least there's room to make your own fun a bit. We managed to get an impromptu game of Duck Duck Goose happening at one point.
Oh, this is lame.
As well as a game of red light, green light.
Quietly.
Red light. Some sexy slow-mo walking. Soccer.
Here she goes to the bars. Going for the bars. I don't know any sports terms, but she's going.
And whatever this was.
Hey guys!
For a game that's kind of an MMO, I wish there were a bunch of official side activities just to mix things up now and then.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely expect people to be happy replaying through stuff a lot. Once you finish the campaign and hit level cap at 20, all you can really do is just replay the 20-odd regular missions and co-op strikes that are available.
Well, to be fair, there are strike playlists that send you through strikes at high levels. And they mix things up by chucking harder enemies at you. There are also daily missions too.
Yeah, I mean, they help keep it feeling a bit fresher, but then you're still just replaying the same missions, aren't you?
Yeah. Although the first high-level 6-person raid only went live as we recorded this review, so we couldn't check that out properly. But we've heard they're quite epic. And I think Bungie will constantly be fiddling and adding new stuff for those who want to come back to the game regularly.
Speaking of those raids though, it's frustrating that they won't offer matchmaking for it. I mean, having 5 other friends who are all on that platform and a high enough level and online at the same time is going to be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I guess it's because they want people to work together as friends, and they are going to be quite challenging, but still, just put matchmaking in.
There are of course a bunch of PvP options, and these are tucked away in what's called the Crucible and offer up 4 deathmatch and capture variations.
Alpha Team, destroy your enemies.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the most interesting array of modes.
Zone A's captured. It's yours.
They're fun enough, but it's just nothing we haven't seen before. I was expecting more objective-based modes.
Once again, it's a pretty limited competitive multiplayer offering all up. With just the 4 basic modes by default and no real skill-based matchmaking anywhere or any way to make custom games, I mean, it's hardly going to position itself as the next great competitive game.
No, but it does play quite differently to other shooters, and that's a good thing. And it's one of the best next-gen games that are out at the moment. But we should wrap this up. Final thoughts, Hex?
I'm a little bit torn on this one, Bajo. I mean, it just does the core mechanics of shooting and looting so well that I couldn't help but have fun. But then it missed that opportunity of a truly great story, and the wider world felt quite hollow and sterile. I think this universe needed a little bit more for me to truly fall in love with it, so I'm giving it 7.
I feel like we've been a little bit negative with this game, Hex, but it's only because this is a Bungie game, so our expectations were super high based on what Bungie have done before. But if you put that aside, I think this game is still pretty incredible, and it taps into that thing that makes the Borderlands series so good, you know, that compelling need to keep playing and get the next piece of gear. I'm going to give it 8.5.
Action.
So, did you name the game for this week?
It's excited.
It was Give My Regards to Broad Street, released in 1985 on Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. You played as legendary singer-songwriter Paul McCartney, who was racing around London trying to complete his latest album by seeking out 7 band members who each have a musical part to play. It was a huge flop of a game based on a huge flop of a movie, and it's our Name the Game for this week because Sir Paul McCartney wrote and performed the end credits song for Destiny.
Well, next week on the show, we admire Southern Europe at 100 kilometers per hour in Forza Horizon 2.
This is going to be the summer of our lives.
So, how's the car? As far as I know, you're one of the first people in Europe to drive that thing. There's a lot of people at the festival waiting to get a look at it. So, let's get it there in one piece, yeah?
And over on Spawn Point, our show for younger gamers this weekend on ABC3, we're celebrating our 200th episode. There'll be highlights from some of our favourite shows and also a review of Disney Infinity 2.0.
Wait. You stole an Infinity Stone. One of the most powerful objects in the universe. Arona the Accuser. One of the most vile despots in the universe. But you have no exit strategy.
Until next time, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Bajo out.
Coordinated again, Bajo. Last week we had cat t-shirts on, and now I'm wearing a moon, and you've got a moon.
You've got a 50-50 chance with me, cats or space, or sometimes together. I just go online and I search for cat space t-shirt.
You would do that.
Get them all.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Just got cat underpants on.